Entire civilizations vanished, not because of war or disease, but because the rains stopped, rivers shifted, crops failed, and cities that had stood for centuries were abandoned, left to crumble into dust and mystery. Climate change isn't just a modern problem. It's a hidden force that has shaped and shattered human history for thousands of years. The warnings left in their ruins are more relevant now than ever. And here's the wild part. Not only did they face the same kinds of climate disasters we're confronting today, in some ways, they handled it better or worse. Their choices hold a mirror to ours. In this video from Armchair Archaeology, we'll explore how ancient civilizations battled climate disaster. Some survived with brilliant innovations, massive canals, drought-proof farms, even giant underground refrigerators. Others collapsed completely. And what's wild? One ancient society figured out how to beat extreme heat with a technology so clever, modern engineers are bringing it back today. Stick around. You'll want to see how they did it. And if you love exploring the hidden side of history, ancient mysteries, and how the past shapes our future, make sure to subscribe to Armchair Archaeology. Join our community of curious minds, and don't miss the next deep dive into humanity's forgotten stories. But first, how do we even know ancient climates changed? The clues are hidden in ice, mud, and even the rings of trees. Let's take a look. How do we know what the climate was like thousands of years ago? There were no satellites, no weather stations, no written forecasts. But the Earth keeps its own records, if you know where to look. Tree rings are one of the most precise natural archives. Each year, a tree adds a new ring. Wide rings signal years of plentiful rain and good growing conditions. Narrow rings, years of drought, cold, or stress. Some trees, especially ancient bristlecone pines, hold over 5,000 years of detailed climate history locked inside their trunks. Glaciers and polar ice caps hold even older records. Deep ice cores capture tiny bubbles of ancient air, preserving atmospheric conditions from as far back as 800,000 years. Trapped inside are clues about past greenhouse gas levels, volcanic eruptions, and even dust from long-forgotten droughts. The ground beneath lakes and oceans tells another story. As sediment slowly settles year after year, it traps pollen grains from nearby plants. By studying which species were dominant at different layers, scientists can reconstruct ancient climates, whether the region was wet, dry, cold, or warm. Some lakes hold unbroken climate records stretching back tens of thousands of years. Even caves act as climate archives. Think of stalagmites like stone time-lapse diaries. In wet years, they grow faster. In dry years, growth slows. The minerals inside capture chemical fingerprints of past rainfall, decade after decade, century after century. All of these clues fit together like pieces of an enormous puzzle. And when scientists assemble that puzzle, a clear message emerges. The climate has never been stable for long. And when it changes, human history changes with it. And few civilizations felt that reality more than the Maya. Let's head to Central America. For centuries, the Maya civilization flourished in the tropical forests of present-day southern Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, and Honduras. They built towering pyramids, sprawling cities, and developed a complex calendar and writing system. At their peak, millions of people lived in city-states spread across the rainforest. But by the late 800s CE, something began to unravel. City after city was abandoned. Populations plummeted. The collapse wasn't sudden, but it was devastating. For years, scholars blamed warfare, political instability, or invasions. But the real culprit was hiding in the environment. Climate records from lake sediments, cave formations, and ancient stalagmites show a pattern of severe, prolonged droughts hitting the Maya heartland. These weren't short dry spells, they lasted for decades. Imagine living through not just one bad drought, but your entire lifetime, being marked by failing rains, dying crops, and empty reservoirs. The Maya were especially vulnerable because their entire agricultural system depended on regular rainfall. Unlike Egypt or Mesopotamia, they had no major rivers to rely on. When the rains failed, crops withered, reservoirs dried up, famines set in. Adding to the crisis, evidence from ancient soil reveals widespread deforestation. Trees were cleared for farming, construction, and fuel. But fewer trees meant less moisture in the air and hotter ground temperatures, which may have weakened local rainfall even further. This devastating feedback loop, climate stress made worse by human choices, became a tipping point. It wasn't a single catastrophic moment, but a slow unraveling. Some cities, like Chichen Itza, adapted by shifting to trade and different water strategies. Others simply disappeared into the jungle. It's a sobering reminder of how dependent civilizations are on water, and how environmental stress, combined with human decisions, can spiral out of control. And if you love uncovering the mysteries of lost civilizations, I've put together an ebook called Secrets of the Ancient World. It dives deeper into ancient technologies, lost cities, and unsolved mysteries. You'll find the link in the pinned comment. The Maya weren't the only ones. Over 6,000 miles away, the mighty Akkadian Empire faced an eerily similar fate. Around 400-300 years ago, the Akkadian Empire rose to dominate Mesopotamia, uniting city-states from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean. Led by powerful rulers like Sargon of Akkad, it was a civilization built on mastery of irrigation, trade, and military conquest. For over a century, it thrived as the first empire in human history. Then, it began to unravel. Climate data from ocean sediment cores in the Gulf of Oman, paired with archaeological soil studies in Iraq and Syria, reveal that around 2200 BCE, the region was struck by an intense megadrought. Rainfall dropped by as much as 30%. The mighty Tigris and Euphrates shrank. Cropland dried out. Dust storms swept across the plains. Archaeologists uncovered layers of wind-blown dust, some more than a meter thick, covering abandoned farmlands and cities. Once rich fields were reduced to barren wastelands in just a few years. This wasn't a gradual decline, it was an ecological collapse. To put it in perspective, imagine entire stretches of farmland, from Texas to Kansas, turning to dust in just a few years. That's the scale we're talking about. Famines spread quickly. Trade routes collapsed. Entire communities fled the countryside, overwhelming urban centers already struggling to survive. Political chaos followed as outlying regions rebelled and the imperial government fractured. Ancient texts bear witness to the suffering. A Sumerian lament mourns, "The storm consumed the cities. The fields produce no grain. The people moan." These are the raw voices of people watching their world disintegrate. It's a sobering parallel to today's global systems. Just like the Akkadians, modern societies are deeply dependent on fragile water supplies and vast, interconnected supply chains. And when climate shifts strike hard enough, those lifelines can snap. And Mesopotamia wasn't the only cradle of civilization tested by climate chaos. Along the banks of the Nile, even mighty Egypt faced a similar reckoning. For over 3,000 years, ancient Egypt thrived along the banks of the Nile. Its entire civilization was built around one predictable cycle, the river's annual flood. Each year, the Nile swelled with water from rains in the distant Ethiopian highlands, depositing nutrient-rich silt that turned the desert into fertile farmland. When the flood came, Egypt flourished. When it failed, famine followed. Egypt is often remembered for its stability, but climate disruption tested it time and again. Sediment cores from the Nile Delta, combined with paleoclimate records from East Africa, reveal that around 2200 BCE, exactly when the Akkadian Empire fell, Egypt faced a devastating megadrought. Grain records and famine inscriptions from the Old Kingdom's final years describe desperate conditions. Fields dried up, people abandoned villages. Central power collapsed into chaos, leading to what historians call the First Intermediate Period, a time of warlords, famine, and political fragmentation. The very government that had just finished building the Great Pyramids unraveled within a generation. Think about that. One moment, they're building wonders that still stand today. The next, the system behind it all crumbles. This wasn't an isolated crisis. Climate data confirms that the same megadrought devastating Egypt was simultaneously hammering the Akkadian Empire over 1,000 kilometers away. Two of the world's most powerful civilizations, unconnected politically but linked by the same climate system, were pushed to the brink together. And yet, Egypt's story is different. Unlike the Akkadians, Egypt recovered. As the Nile floods eventually returned, new dynasties rose from the ashes, ushering in a golden age of stability and monumental construction. But the scars of that collapse remained, etched into their texts, their mythology, and their collective memory. By the way, what's the ancient civilization that fascinates you the most? Drop it in the comments. I'm always looking for new stories to explore in future videos. Even the most resilient civilizations were still vulnerable to forces beyond their control. And to the east, along the great rivers of the Indus Valley, another sophisticated society was about to face a similar test. The Indus Valley Civilization, also known as the Harappan Civilization, was one of the most advanced societies of the ancient world. From roughly 2600 to 1900 BCE, its cities thrived across what is now Pakistan and northwest India. These were marvels of urban planning, grid-like streets, standardized brick sizes, advanced true drainage systems, and public baths. What's remarkable is how egalitarian their cities appear. No massive palaces, no royal tombs, no giant monuments, just orderly, efficient cities designed for civic life. But around 1900 BCE, something began to shift. Populations declined. Great cities like Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro were gradually abandoned. Their writing system disappeared from the archaeological record. Trade with Mesopotamia collapsed. For years, the cause of this mysterious decline baffled researchers. The answer lay not in war, but in water. Geological studies, sediment analysis, and climate models reveal that the monsoon system, the life source for the region's agriculture, began weakening severely. Rivers that once fed the plains, especially the Gaga Hakra, either dried up or drastically changed course. Satellite imagery revealed something astonishing. Beneath today's deserts, the ghostly traces of these vanished rivers still remain. Broad, dry channels that were once vibrant arteries of life. As these rivers disappeared, so did the water that sustained crops, animals, and entire cities. And here's the twist. There was no epic final battle, no catastrophic collapse carved into stone, just a quiet fading. Cities emptying out, rivers vanishing. Communities responded by migrating eastward toward the Ganges Basin, where monsoon patterns remained stronger. Instead of an abrupt collapse, the Indus story became one of transformation. Large urban centers dissolved into smaller, decentralized rural settlements better suited to the new environmental reality. Even the most sophisticated societies are ultimately tethered to water and climate. And soon, this same fragile balance would be tested again, this time in the icy frontiers of medieval Greenland. In the late 10th century, Norse settlers led by Eric the Red sailed west from Iceland and established colonies on the coasts of Greenland. At first, it seemed like a daring success. The climate was relatively mild during what we now call the medieval warm period. Grass grew in the fjords. Cattle and sheep thrived. The settlers built stone churches, farmhouses, and exported walrus ivory to Europe. But their prosperity was fragile. By the 14th century, the climate shifted. The Little Ice Age brought longer, harsher winters, shorter growing seasons, and expanding sea ice. Grasslands shrank. Farmers could no longer grow enough hay to keep livestock alive through the brutal winters. Excavations of abandoned Norse farms reveal a haunting pattern. Layers of animal bones show a clear shift from domesticated cattle and sheep toward hunting wild animals, seals, caribou, and seabirds, as traditional farming became unsustainable. Even their diet, once centered around dairy, grew increasingly dependent on marine mammals. Ice core data and satellite studies confirm that during this period, sea ice expanded dramatically, cutting Greenland's Norse off from trade routes to Europe. Isolated and struggling, the last written record from the colony comes from a wedding held in 1408. After that, silence. Then, silence. No more weddings, no more ships. Just empty farms slowly swallowed by snow and time. Meanwhile, the Inuit thrived during the same period. They relied on technologies perfectly suited to the Arctic: kayaks, dog sleds, seal skin shelters, and specialized hunting tools. Where the Norse tried to force a European farming model onto the Arctic, the Inuit survived because their culture was designed for it. It's a stark lesson. Adaptation isn't optional, it's survival. And that tension between adaptation and collapse runs through the entire human story when climate turns hostile. If you're enjoying this journey and want to support the channel, consider hitting that super thanks button. It's a great way to help us keep bringing you stories like this from the hidden corners of history. When climate turns hostile, water often becomes the line between survival and collapse. Across the ancient world, civilizations facing droughts and unpredictable rainfall developed astonishing water management systems, technologies so advanced that some are still studied today. It's a reminder that sometimes the smartest solutions aren't new, they're rediscovered. In the deserts of the American Southwest, the Hohokam people engineered an enormous canal network over 500 miles long that irrigated tens of thousands of acres. These canals were so precisely constructed that some sections maintain a slope of just a few centimeters per kilometer, allowing water to flow steadily without washing away the banks. In Jordan, the Nabateans, builders of Petra, mastered survival in one of the driest places on Earth. They carved cisterns, canals, and reservoirs directly into solid rock. Their system captured every drop of seasonal rainfall and funneled it into underground storage, providing enough water to support a thriving city in the middle of the desert. Farther east, the Khmer Empire of Angkor in Cambodia built one of the most extensive hydraulic systems in human history. Massive reservoirs, canals, and moats controlled floodwaters during the rainy season and stored water for droughts. Modern satellite surveys have revealed that this water management system stretched far beyond the visible ruins, covering hundreds of square kilometers. Traces of these systems are still etched into landscapes today, visible from the ground and from space. And here's what's remarkable. Modern engineers are revisiting these ancient technologies, combining them with contemporary science to create sustainable water solutions for communities facing drought and climate stress right now. The brilliance of these designs wasn't just in their scale, but in how they worked with natural landscapes rather than against them. And when water became scarce, ancient societies turned their focus to another challenge: how to keep growing food in unforgiving climates. Water alone wasn't enough to ensure survival. Growing food in unpredictable climates pushed ancient societies to develop ingenious agricultural techniques, many of which are still relevant today. In the Andes, the Inca mastered terraced farming. They carved thousands of steps into mountain slopes, turning steep, erosion-prone land into productive farmland. These terraces captured rainwater, reduced soil loss, and even created microclimates, warm pockets that extended growing seasons. Some of these terraces are still in use over 500 years later. In the lakes surrounding Tenochtitlan, the Aztecs engineered chinampas, floating gardens built on woven mats of reeds and anchored with willow trees. Layers of mud, sediment, and plant material created soil so fertile that a single acre could produce up to 7 harvests per year. The canals between the gardens not only irrigated crops, but also acted as natural climate regulators, cooling the air and stabilizing moisture levels. In the Arabian Peninsula, farmers devised qanats, underground tunnels that tapped into distant aquifers. These gently sloping channels delivered water to surface farms without evaporation, an elegant solution for desert agriculture that some communities still use today. Even the crops themselves evolved. Farmers selectively bred hardy, drought-resistant plants like millet, sorghum, and barley. These grains thrived where thirstier crops like wheat and rice failed, helping communities survive long droughts. What's striking is how many of these techniques are being revived today. Farmers facing extreme heat, depleted soils, and water shortages are looking back, restoring terraces, rebuilding qanats, and experimenting with floating farms as modern solutions to an increasingly unstable climate. Adaptation wasn't optional. For ancient farmers, it was a matter of survival. And maybe it still is. As modern farmers worldwide face droughts, floods, and soil exhaustion, they're once again looking backward to move forward. And when even farming couldn't sustain them, people did something else. They moved, transforming entire continents in the process. When adaptation wasn't enough, civilizations faced a stark choice: move or perish. Climate-driven migration has been one of the most powerful forces in shaping human history, triggering the collapse of old societies and the rise of new ones. One of the most dramatic examples comes from the Late Bronze Age, around 1200 BCE. A mysterious wave of seaborne raiders and migrants, known today as the Sea Peoples, swept across the eastern Mediterranean. Archaeological and climate evidence suggest that a deadly combination of prolonged drought, famine, and societal stress pushed populations from regions like Anatolia and the Aegean to abandon their homelands. Their arrival coincided with the sudden collapse of major civilizations, including the Hittites, Mycenaeans, and parts of Egypt, plunging the region into a centuries-long dark age. In Africa, the Bantu migrations reshaped the continent. Beginning around 1000 BCE, Bantu-speaking peoples spread from West Africa across Central, Eastern, and Southern Africa. As the Sahara grew increasingly dry, agricultural communities were forced southward in search of water and arable land. Along the way, they carried ironworking, farming techniques, and languages that still shape Africa today. Across Eurasia, nomadic cultures like the Scythians, Huns, and later, the Mongols expanded their territories in response to cycles of drought and changing grasslands. These were societies built on mobility, turning environmental stress into opportunity through trade, conquest, and cultural exchange. Migrations like these didn't just move people, they redrew the map of human civilization. Technologies, languages, and ideas spread across continents as populations adapted to new environments. Entire cultural landscapes were transformed because the climate forced people to move. It's not just history. Today, millions are being displaced by drought, rising seas, and failing crops. This isn't ancient history, it's current events. It's a pattern that hasn't stopped. From drought-driven migrations today in East Africa to rising sea levels threatening coastal cities worldwide, the link between climate and human movement is as real now as it was thousands of years ago. Look closely at the long arc of history, and one pattern becomes impossible to ignore. When the climate changes, societies are forced to respond. Civilizations that ignored environmental warning signs collapsed. Those that adapted through ingenuity, cooperation, and flexibility survived. The evidence is written across the ancient world. The Mayas' dependence on rainfall left them dangerously exposed when the droughts came. The Akkadians watched their irrigation-fed empire dry up into dust. The Norse settlers in Greenland refused to abandon their European farming lifestyle and vanished, while the Inuit thrived by embracing technologies perfectly suited to the Arctic. Every story we've explored today points to the same truth. Resilience wasn't about strength, it was about adaptability. Today, the challenge is both familiar and unprecedented. For the first time in history, the entire planet faces a climate crisis together. Our supply chains, food systems, water supplies, and energy grids are more interconnected and more fragile than anything ancient civilizations ever experienced. Unlike in the past, there's no untouched frontier left to migrate to. But the past doesn't just warn us, it offers solutions. Around the world, communities are reviving ancient technologies, restoring mountain terraces, rebuilding qanats, reviving floating farms, and combining them with renewable energy, flood-resistant infrastructure, and regenerative agriculture. Adaptation isn't just possible, it's something humanity has done time and time again. The difference now is scale. Whether we follow the path of collapse or resilience depends on how quickly we act, how creatively we adapt, and whether we choose to work with nature instead of against it. The climate has changed before. It's changing again. The real question is whether we've learned from the past or are about to repeat it. But before we close, remember that ancient cooling technology we teased at the start? At the start of this video, we promised you a remarkable story, an ancient technology so ingenious it's making a comeback in the fight against modern climate change. And here it is. In ancient Persia, engineers developed the Yakchal, massive dome-shaped structures with deep underground chambers designed to store ice and preserve food right in the middle of the desert. These structures used a combination of thick, insulating walls made from a special mortar called sarouj, underground storage, and an elegant system of wind catchers. These wind towers funneled cool air down while allowing hot air to rise out, and nearby water pools enhanced the cooling effect through evaporation. The result? Ice could be harvested in winter, stored underground, and kept frozen well into the blazing summer months, even when outside temperatures soared above 100 degrees Fahrenheit. What's incredible is that engineers today are studying the principles behind the Yakchal to design passive cooling systems that require no electricity. In a world increasingly threatened by extreme heat and over-reliance on energy-hungry air conditioning, a 2,000-year-old solution may hold part of the answer. And if this fascinates you, Secrets of the Ancient World goes even further, exploring ancient innovations, unsolved mysteries, and the lessons they hold for us today. Check the pinned comment below to learn more. In a way, the Yakchal is the perfect symbol. It shows that our ancestors weren't passive victims of climate. They were engineers, innovators, survivors. And this is what history truly teaches us. The past isn't just a catalogue of collapse, it's also a blueprint for resilience. Civilizations across time adapted, innovated, and found ways to survive changing climates. Some failed. Others thrived by working with nature, not against it. Today, we face the same choice. The climate has changed before. It's changing again. Whether we collapse or adapt depends on how willing we are to learn from those who came before us. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the hidden history of ancient civilizations and climate change. If you found this video thought-provoking, consider supporting our channel, Armchair Archaeology, by giving it a thumbs up and subscribing for more fascinating stories from the past. It helps us bring more content like this to curious minds around the world. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you won't miss our next deep exploration into the mysteries of history. We'd love to hear from you. What ancient civilization should we cover next? Share your suggestions in the comments below. Until our next discovery, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep the flame of curiosity burning bright.